Hi everyone, welcome to teatalks. Today we are going to talk with Theo Priestley. He's an anti-futurist, and we are going to talk about futurism and anti-futurism concepts. Well, welcome Theo.
Okay.
Hi, I'm glad to see you here actually. If you want, we can start with your introduction, then we can continue with the questions, okay?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on the show. Thank you for asking. My name is Theo Priestley. I am a technology evangelist and futurist. I have been in the technology industry for around 20 years now, 10 of which has been providing foresight and insight into technology trends and business trends and how they impact business, technology, and society in general. I give keynote talks around the world, openly at conferences or with specific clients around their concerns for the technology's impact and what they see, what they want to know about the future, maybe 5, 10 years, 20 years time, and how better to prepare for their business. I've done a fair bit of online writing for various publications, and I have a new book coming out in next year in conjunction with a number of other futurists, which will be published by Bloomsbury. So busy time.
Yeah, I see. That's very cool actually. And that's an honor again to see you in our program. Now I'm starting with the questions that we collected from our followers.
Yeah.
First of all, it's about the anti-futurism that you mentioned about yourself. Why do you
Yeah.
define yourself as anti-futurist?
Yeah, so like I said, I've been doing futurism and foresight study and insight for a long time now. And what concerned me was that there was a lot of hype poured in technology trends in general and not much forethought around whether these were the right paths and technology trends that we should be following. Futurists in general, from what I could gather from writing, and certainly some of the more influential ones like Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis, would write from a very, very positive angle, but never consider where some of this technology might lead us. And so I got to thinking around, well, I'm kind of like almost the opposite end of that, which is I look to study the future, but I also look to prepare people for some of the negative impacts if they decide to follow a particular trend. So, for example, obviously the rise of big data and what they call surveillance capitalism and giving lots of control to companies like Google and Amazon for perceived service, but not really understanding the level of control that they have over our data. Is that something that we could have actually foreseen years ago? And if it was, why weren't some of the negative aspects brought up? Well, partly because everyone was very focused on the convenience aspect of being able to shop online and get whatever we want and get discounts and be served adverts that are supposed to be relevant to us. So we're now in the situation where we understand that there's no such thing as data privacy anymore. But was there a point in time when futurists could have foreseen this and thought, well, maybe we should reconsider what we're doing? So this, in a kind of nutshell, is why I call myself an anti-futurist. I'm trying to look at technology trends and the future very dispassionately, very and not without so much hype applied to it.
I see. Actually, the second question is also parallel with your answer, and I think it's gonna be a completion for your thoughts. What do you think about the concept of futurism now?
Sure. So, like I said, I think futurism and futurists have tended to concentrate a lot on the positive aspects without really questioning why we're doing some of the things we're doing when they project forward. I think that the futurism in general and foresight consulting is extremely valuable still. It has a lot of valuable contributions to society and business in general, to be able to give leaders and people an idea of what the future will look like in the near term and the far term. I think what's happened recently is that futurism and futurists have become a bit of a buzzword. So I mean, I don't have a certificate or anything else like that. There's no such, for me, it was more a combination of the things, my experiences in the past in the industry that have led me to this point. But I do think that there are a lot of people out there who claim to be futurists who have probably never spoken about futurism before, have never actually done any consulting before, have never written before. And all of a sudden, it's now this term that people have latched onto, a bit like if you go on LinkedIn and you have ninjas and gurus on LinkedIn. Futurist seems to be one that people have attached to because it's kind of fancy and cool to be considered one. And we're in this sort of dangerous place where all they're really doing is regurgitating the hype that the press give without really furthering the cause. So there's a bit of negative light. I think futurism could actually reinvent itself. I do believe that we should be including a lot more younger people. So people from almost school age who have no concept of formal futurism, but who are already thinking about what's going to happen in the future and what they want to be shaped as a future. So I think we should kind of take futurism back a step, reconsider what it means for the future, funnily enough, and start to include different demographics and age groups that weren't considered before.
I see. Thanks for the answer, actually. And if we are talking about futurism, the concept of futurism, another topic would be AI, artificial intelligence. Yeah. And maybe you have watched it. Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, he shared his opinions about this topic.
They will.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Machine is good in knowledge, but human beings are good at the wisdom. So that is why I'm encouraging a lot of government and talking to a lot of government officers, pay special attention to the education system. If you want, the machine is going to be smarter than human being. This is for sure. All right, I'm a guarantee. Because the day when we design the machine, we know machine is powerful, stronger than us. When we design the trains and buses, we know machine is going to run faster than us. When we have the computers, we have to know that machine is going to be smarter than us. But the human being, they are not only smart, they have the wisdom.
And so artificial intelligence will never have wisdom?
No.
No.
No. It's about a value, it's about wisdom, it's about experience. It's about the user experience. It's about your life experience. So I don't think the artificial intelligence is going to replace the wisdom. Artificial intelligence is going to be very smart.
What do you think about his opinions about the knowledge and information difference?
Yeah, I mean, Jack's got some really sort of interesting points. I mean, when I did my TED talk on AI a few years ago, I mentioned, and I included a mention about Jack Ma and his idea that his statement that there would be an AI on the cover of Time Magazine's CEO of the Year by 2030. Now, that's only 10 years away. Do I think that will be the case? No. There are examples of hedge funds, for example, with large sort of appointed an AI on the board, and the AI is actually running some of the funds, managing some of the funds. And that's very different from a CEO managing a company, for example, because there's a lot more than just processing data. And I think it goes to your point that you make in that we as people process information, but we also have knowledge from past experience. We also have knowledge from kind of gut instinct as well. So something that you can't teach a machine is, this might look correct on paper and all the data tells me that this is correct, but my feeling is that it's not, because of something in my experience that I've learned in the past tells me that the outcome could be different. And this is something that you can't really teach a machine. I will never say there will never be a conscious machine, but our level of ability to create one is, we're at the amoebic stage, or very sort of embryonic stage of understanding what machine learning, deep learning and AI will give us. And so when you see predictions like, there's going to be real artificial general intelligence by 2050 or 2030 even, the chances are very slim, because we don't even know how to create intelligence ourselves or even understand intelligence and the concept and what the brain does. So being able to mimic that process is impossible. So information is just data points. Knowledge is a collection of data applied to experience and then learnings from that, and that's completely different.
Yeah.
So they are two different concepts.
Thank you very much. And what do you think about the power of today's world? What is power in today's world? What was it in the past, and what will it be in the future?
That's a very open question. If we look at what power means today, then obviously power infers control, and control infers that you have a lot of, I guess, political persuasion, a lot of financial persuasion as well, and a lot of data at your disposal. Today, I think the people who have control of the data probably have most of the power at the moment. You can have all the money in the world, but without actually having data or information and knowledge, it doesn't really mean anything. You can be rich and dumb. Whereas if you were rich and had data and understood what you could do with that data, then you have true power. In the past, I guess it was all about size. I felt powerful because I had a large bank account or I had a big company, for example. I think today and in the future, it will be who controls as much data in the past, as much data in the future as possible. And I think George Orwell said something like along the lines of, he who controls the past controls the future, but he who controls the present controls the past. And I think he was inferring that you can use data to actually alter the facts of the past and essentially rewrite the past and rewrite historical events. And that's kind of powerful and dangerous at the same time.
Thanks for your answer. That was really cool. Well, what do you think about the lack of economic opportunity and also unemployment? What's your foresight about this trouble? Will it increase?
So if we look back at that again, if we look back at the past, the Industrial Revolution was supposed to disrupt manual labor, manual workers, and cause economic collapse and mass unemployment. And the reality was very different. It actually gave us an economic boom, and mass employment didn't happen because people adapted and learned new skills. I think we're in that kind of situation, but I think the path that it will take will be slightly different. So I think the rate at which we have to learn new skills might change. In fact, it might actually be that we have to learn something a lot quicker than we did in the past, because of the level of automation that can be afforded to nowadays. It's not infallible. I don't think that AI will come along and completely disrupt everyone at the same time. I keep seeing reports of, for example, in the United States, 200,000 people will be made redundant in the financial services industry because of AI and automation. Now, the typical knee-jerk reaction is, that's a huge amount of people, mass unemployment, terrible. But then when you look at the data, it's 10 years. 10 years is an awful long time. There are something ridiculous like, over 1 million workers in the US in financial services. It could actually be a lot larger. I need to check my numbers. So the impact is actually small as well in terms of people. And banks and financial institutions have been letting people go by the thousands practically every year for the last 20 years. I mean, in the UK, the Royal Bank of Scotland and HSBC have been shedding jobs, 14,000 jobs in the space of 3 years, for example, in one institution alone. So when you look at the numbers dispassionately and without emotion, the impact is actually quite small and not unusual for today. So that just shows you that the rate of change for some of the AI and automation and the panic isn't actually there. But where we lack is foresight on a governmental aspect to tackle this change. Policy doesn't exist to help people retrain those people who are in kind of sort of low administrative tasks who will eventually sort of struggle. How do we prepare them to become better? We don't want them to drop out of society. How do we prepare them to learn something new? How do we ensure that people who are leaving school have the right level of education to actually go that step higher now? Because suddenly that lowest job opportunity is no longer there as well. So there's lots of governmental, educational policy reform that needs to happen as well. And that's going to take time. So, long answer there. What do I think of the lack of opportunity? I don't think there's going to be a lack of opportunity or mass unemployment. It's going to take a lot longer than I think people realize because AI just isn't that intelligent yet. But we do need to start preparing now.
I see. And in a parallel question again, has startup ecosystem a future, or it is just about, because it is directly about unemployment? What do you think about this topic?
So I mean, I work with startups and I work with some accelerators as a mentor, and I help them understand product market and marketing strategy is where I sort of focus. I think the startup ecosystem will always have a future. And I think what might happen is that we see a concentrated effort to fund and encourage startups that tackle societal problems, not just invent connected coffee machines and toilet robots, for example, that I saw at CES. I mean, these things are just an absolute waste of time, money, and effort. Won't go anywhere. Doesn't showcase anything intelligent. And I think the future of the ecosystem is where startups are encouraged to tackle a problem, whether it's climate change, whether it's a societal problem like unemployment or homelessness or even food, for example, making sure everyone can get food and clothing or financial access. I think those startups have a bright future. I think where the bubble will occur is insane valuations for things that add nothing. WeWork, for example, is a classic example. Revolut has been scoring massive valuations, and it's just really a card and bank service. So it's just mind-boggling with some of these things at the moment. But there could well be a reset in the future as expectations start to lower as to what the real valuation of a company is, and investment starts pouring into things that have a real impact to improve life in general for everyone.
I see. Another interesting question about startup ecosystem. It's these are the words of the followers. Actually, not my words. I think the government supports and promotes startups in order to hide unemployment. Do you agree with these thoughts?
That's really interesting.
It's really interesting because.
So I guess it goes down to what's the definition of a startup, or what's the definition of a small business. I mean, here in the UK, for example, and especially, in my country, in Scotland, we have a large tech sector. There are a number of startup accelerators that work here, and they are either, one man or two man or three person kind of outfits. They work on extremely low budgets and to begin with to obviously prove their idea, and are supported by either government funding or grants or the accelerator as well. There are also lots of one-person businesses registered because there's lots of freelance people. So, and the thing is that they can be counted as a startup or as a small business. The reality is that they could be financially struggling, and for large periods of the time, they could actually be unemployed technically because they don't have any work coming in, but they're not counted because they're seen as being employed by their business or being a director of their business. So I can see the point of this question. So while I think that the impact of the number of people employed in startups is small, or certainly the numbers in startups is small, I don't think it would have such a large impact on the numbers being reported for the unemployed. But I do think it's actually an interesting question for other people to consider and actually look at in their areas, in their regions, as to how many startups exist, how many are currently in an accelerator that is and are considered unfunded because technically there's no income there, and those people are earning very small amounts to obviously test and prove their business idea, but they wouldn't be counted as unemployed. But technically, they're probably not making enough money to actually be employed.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting question and one that merits a lot more thought.
Yeah, I think so. That was a very interesting question, actually. And also another topic, the climate change. What do you think about the future of climate change? And can humanity overcome this problem by the robots or maybe AI?
So climate change can only be managed and lived with. We can't solve the issue of climate change. It's happening. You can't stop nature. No one can stop a thunderstorm above their house, for example. And we've seen the effects in Australia, where the fires have actually caused that much smoke that it enters the atmosphere, creates a thunderstorm that creates more lightning that actually strikes the ground and starts more fires. So that gives you even on a small microcosm and country scale, that gives you the size of the problem that we as a planet have to face. And we can't control that, so there's absolutely no way that we can control something on a planetary scale that's impacting us. So what we need to do is actually start to reconsider how we live and how future generations live to prepare them for that, because we will be living, you and I, and probably everyone on who will watch this will be living through climate change, and how we deal with that is up to us as individuals. If we want to continue living the way we do, that's up to you. If we want to alter some of our habits, so we recycle more, we stop eating meat, we stop driving the car as often, that kind of thing, then small changes may have larger effects further down the line, but only if everyone on the planet actually adopts them. We can't algorithmically get our way out of this. We can look at large-scale solutions that remove carbon dioxide from the air, for example, or look to harness different types of power, so wave, solar, electrical, and reduce our reliance on the oil and coal industries. But it is something, a sobering fact is that the oil industry is going to be around for decades to come. There is still decades of supply left. There are still new oil fields being opened every year to tap into new reserves. So despite, what the oil industry wants us to believe, which is we're becoming more conscious and things like that, it shows no sign of slowing down, and they will hang on to that industry until their dying breath, which means there will always be people who will rely on oil and diesel and produce emissions. So we've got a long way to go, but I think we need to just prepare for how to live with it.
I see. Actually, that was a really good interview, and it's gonna be the final question. And I think this is the most important part because it's about a suggestion to the young people. What's your suggestion to the young people who are in UK, Turkey, and anywhere? What should they do for the future for themselves?
So I think, on a personal note, I think they should learn futurism and foresight, because that'll help them prepare for certain scenarios and to be able to think through particular problems. So I think problems and critical solving skills are really important. I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old son. My 16-year-old, funnily enough, is no longer interested in computing, and he's looking at engineering type subjects, which kind of makes me happy because I do see that in the future we will have to engineer our way out of problems like we used to, whereas right now we seem to be relying on the fact that we should just code everything and that will help us. Well, when the lights go out and there's no electricity, who's going to run the code? Nobody. Who's going to repair the robots? Well, if we are building more machines, who's going to repair them? Well, it's not a data scientist isn't going to repair it because it has physical moving parts. If it's really interesting because there are farmers who have bought very advanced machinery from John Deere, big manufacturer of farming equipment, and the company had put in Internet of Things, and the tractors are basically connected to the internet so that John Deere can track what they're being used as, track when the maintenance is due, etc. But as a result of that, it means that the people who own the machines have to pay extremely high prices and go to John Deere when they want their equipment to be repaired. Now, farmers then went to basically hackers to hack the software to take them off the grid so that you couldn't track them anymore. Because John Deere could say, well, we can invalidate you're going to invalidate your warranty, so we'll actually kill your machine remotely and you'll never be able to use it until you come back to us and pay what we pay our prices. And so the farmers went along and got software to hack it and remove that ability. But now, instead of doing that, farmers are actually going back to buying very old 20, 30, 40-year-old tractors instead of the new equipment because they're practical. Yeah. They know how to repair them. They want to know how to repair them. And they'll last forever if you treat them right. And there's no electronics involved. And I see that as quite an interesting trend, and perhaps foresight into the types of skills that people will need to learn in the future to become self-sufficient. Because if we are impacted by climate change, if there is water shortages and global migration of animals and people and things like that, we are going to have to learn to be more self-sufficient and grow our own crops, repair our own machinery, that kind of thing. And so I see the engineering type of subjects, the technical subjects, the more practical subjects being pushed to the fore as a very critical skill, and all the sort of and all the technology and the coding and learning data science suddenly becomes redundant. It's going to be a slow, gradual thing. That could be something that happens in 20, 30 years time. But I do see it happening. So young people is, I think, critical and problem-solving skills and being able to see through problems and kind of trace where they could lead, answers could lead as a consequence is critical. And then preparation, I think, is probably the biggest thing that I would tell young people as well. Pay attention to what the world is like today and how we've messed up as humans and generations, and make sure you don't make the same mistakes by preparing for it.
That's great. That was a great answer. Thank you very much, Theo. That was a pleasure. Also, nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you again for asking. It's been a pleasure.
As you see, it's an open platform, teatalks, and we are trying to grow it. And I think it has a future because we are talking about various important topics for the future and the world. It's not a Turkish platform. We are in Turkey. We're based in Turkey, but it's a global platform. And all of the contributors are from anywhere in the world, the US, UK, Denmark, and etc. So thanks for your participation. I really appreciate it. Nice to meet you. Have a nice day. Have a nice
Thank you very
Saturday.
much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.